Imagine traveling thousands of years into the past. There are no cities, no hospitals, no cemeteries, no funeral homes, no books telling people what to do when someone dies. You are living with a small human group. Life is simple, but extremely difficult. Every morning, you search for food. You look for water. You protect yourself from wild animals. You take care of children. And when darkness arrives, you return to a safe place. But one day, someone in your group dies. It is someone you know, someone who walked beside you, someone who shared food with you, someone who helped you survive. Maybe it was your partner, maybe your parent, maybe your child. Only a short time ago, this person was alive. But now, they are completely still. You call their name. There is no response. You touch them. Nothing happens. You wait. Still nothing. And now you face a problem that humans have faced for an incredibly long time. What do you do with the body? Do you simply leave it there? Do you move it somewhere safe? Do you hide it from wild animals? Or do you put it inside the ground? Today, burying the dead may seem completely normal. But imagine being one of the first humans to ever make that decision. Why would you do it? Did you understand what death meant? Were you afraid of what might happen to the body? Did you want to protect it from animals? Or was there something much deeper? Maybe. You simply could not accept leaving someone you loved behind. And this is where the mystery begins. Because archaeologists have discovered ancient human remains that appear to have been deliberately buried. But there is an important problem. We don't have the thoughts of those people. We don't have their voices. We don't have their stories. We don't know exactly what they believed. All we have are bones, soil, caves, and traces left behind thousands of years ago. And from those clues, we are trying to reconstruct one of the most mysterious behaviors in human history. Why did humans begin burying their dead? But before we can answer that, we need to understand something even more basic. Humans did not suddenly discover death one day. They had been watching living things die for a very long time, and that changes the question completely. Death was not something humans suddenly discovered. Our ancient ancestors watched animals die. They hunted animals, they saw injuries, they saw sickness, and they watched members of their own groups grow weak and disappear. So the experience of death is extremely old. But there is a major difference between seeing someone die and deliberately doing something with their body afterward. If someone died inside a cave and their body remained there, that does not automatically mean they were buried. Maybe they simply died there. Maybe soil naturally covered them. Maybe rocks fell. Maybe water moved sediment around the body. Natural processes can create patterns that look surprisingly intentional. That is why archaeologists have an incredibly difficult job. They have to determine whether a body was deliberately placed somewhere, or whether nature put it there. They examine the position of the skeleton. They study the surrounding soil. They look for signs of a pit. They examine the condition of the bones. And they compare the entire site with what natural processes could have produced. If the evidence points toward deliberate placement, then something fascinating may have happened. Someone made a decision. Someone moved the body. Someone placed it in a particular location, and someone may have covered it. That means the behavior was not simply about death. It involved intention. And intention is what makes burial so important. Because once humans began deliberately treating their dead in particular ways, something had changed. The dead person was no longer simply a body lying on the ground. They were someone who had belonged to the group, someone who had relationships, someone whose absence mattered. And perhaps this is where emotion entered the story. Imagine losing someone you depended on. You know they are no longer alive, but their face is still recognizable. Their hands are still there. Their body is still familiar. Your mind remembers everything about them. Their voice, their movements, the way they used to sit, the way they used to help. And suddenly, all of that is gone. Maybe burial was partly a way for humans to deal with that impossible moment. But we should be careful. We cannot simply look at an ancient grave and say, they buried this person because they loved them. We don't know that for certain. Archaeology gives us evidence. It does not give us a direct recording of someone's emotions. So we have to consider several possibilities. And one of the simplest possibilities is protection. A dead body could attract animals. For a small human group living in a dangerous environment, that could become a serious problem. Imagine sleeping near a body while predators are nearby. The smell could attract scavengers. Wild animals could approach the group. The body could also create an unpleasant environment around a living area. So one possibility is that early burial had a practical purpose. Move the body away, cover it. Keep animals away. Keep the living area safer. It makes sense. But there is a problem. If protection was the only reason, why do some ancient burial sites appear more complicated than a simple disposal of a body? In some cases, researchers have found bodies in particular positions. Some were placed inside pits. Some sites contain multiple individuals. Some burials have unusual objects or materials associated with them. And this creates another possibility. Maybe burial was not only practical, maybe it was social, maybe it was emotional, maybe it was symbolic, or perhaps several reasons existed at the same time. That is something we often forget about ancient humans. We sometimes imagine them as simple survival machines. Eat, run, hunt, sleep, repeat. But humans have always been social animals. We form relationships. We remember people. We become attached. We cooperate. We grieve. So perhaps the treatment of the dead was another expression of this social world. A dead person was still connected to the living. They had a place in the group. They had relationships. They had memories attached to them. And burying them may have helped the group deal with their absence. But then another fascinating question appears. Could burial have been connected to beliefs about what happens after death? This is where the evidence becomes much harder to interpret, because finding a burial does not automatically prove belief in an afterlife. A person could bury someone without believing that the dead person travels to another world. They could simply want the body protected. They could want the body out of the way. They could be expressing respect, or they could have beliefs that we can no longer understand. We simply don't know, and perhaps we never will. But there is something we can say with much more confidence. At some point in human history, some communities began treating the dead in ways that were more deliberate than simply leaving them where they died. And that tells us something important. Humans were beginning to create cultural responses to death. So how old is this behavior? There is no single universally accepted date for the very first human burial. That is because the archaeological record is complicated. Different sites have different levels of evidence. Some very ancient human remains have been interpreted as intentional burials. In parts of the Middle East, for example, researchers have studied ancient remains from Middle Paleolithic sites and debated whether certain individuals were deliberately buried. But scientists do not automatically agree about every ancient skeleton. Why? Because thousands of years can completely transform a landscape. Soil moves, water flows, caves collapse, animals disturb bones, sediments accumulate. and bones can move after death. Imagine discovering a human skeleton today. You might see a body lying in a strange position, but that position could have been created naturally. The person might have died somewhere else. Water could have moved the bones. A predator could have disturbed the remains. The ground could have shifted. So archaeologists need multiple clues. Was there a pit? Was the body inside that pit? Was the surrounding sediment different? Were the bones unusually well preserved? Was the position consistent with deliberate placement? Were there other individuals nearby? And could natural processes explain everything? The more evidence points toward intentional placement, the stronger the burial interpretation becomes. This is why archaeology sometimes feels like detective work. There is no eyewitness. There is no written confession. There is no video. There is only evidence. And from that evidence, scientists try to reconstruct a moment that happened thousands of years ago. But even if we accept that some ancient humans deliberately buried their dead, one enormous question remains. What were they thinking? Were they simply protecting the body? Were they mourning? Were they following a tradition? Or did they believe that death was not the end? We cannot know for certain. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes ancient burials so fascinating. Here is one possibility that sounds almost like the beginning of a horror story. Maybe ancient humans were afraid of the dead. Maybe they believed the dead could somehow return. Maybe burying the body was a way to prevent that. It is an interesting idea, but there is a problem. We do not have direct evidence showing that the earliest burials were created because people feared the dead would come back. That would be speculation. And this distinction matters. Ancient burials can tell us what people did. They usually cannot tell us exactly what people believed. Still, fear of death is probably one of the oldest human emotions. Think about the world ancient humans lived in. There was no modern medicine, no understanding of infection, no knowledge of the human nervous system, no scientific explanation for why a person suddenly stopped breathing. One day someone could be walking beside you, and the next day, they were motionless. Imagine experiencing that without knowing what death actually was. You might ask, where did they go? Why did they stop moving? Will they come back? What happened to them? We cannot know the answers ancient humans gave to these questions. But humans later developed complex beliefs surrounding death. Different societies created different explanations. Some imagined other worlds. Some believed in spirits. Some believed the dead could continue to influence the living. Others developed completely different ideas. But those later traditions should not automatically be projected backward onto the earliest burials. The evidence simply isn't strong enough. What we can say is that death eventually became much more than a biological event. It became social. It became emotional. And in many cultures, it became symbolic. When someone dies, the entire group can be affected. A parent disappears. A child disappears. A hunter disappears. A partner disappears. A friend disappears. And suddenly, the living have to reorganize their lives. Maybe that is one reason burial became important. It gave the living a way to respond. The burial was not only about the dead, it may also have been about the people who remained alive.